اخیر حکم دادگاه تجدید نظر واشنگتن علیه برچسب غیرقانونی در مورد مجاهدین یکی از وقایع مهم این دوران بود. این واقعه یک دستاورد بزرگ تاریخی در نبرد مقاومت مردم ایران علیه رژیم آخوندی است. دادگاه بطلان برچسب نامشروع را محرز شناخت و حکم داد که اگر وزارت خارجه تصمیم نگیرد خود رأساً نامگذاری را لغو خواهد کرد. این است صدای در هم شکستن زنجیرها. این است صدای در هم شکستن زنجیرها، فرو ریختن تاریکخانه های شیطانسازی و شکست تماشایی رژیم ولایت فقیه. با این نامگذاری میخواستند حق ملت ایران را برای تغییر رژیم آخوندی انکار کنند. اما مقاومت شما با سربلندی تمام این حق را به کرسی نشاند. گفته بودم که حقوق ملت ایران را حتی اگر در کام اژدها هم پنهان کنید آن را بیرون خواهیم کشید. من البته امیدوارم که وزیر امور خارجه آمریکا خانم هیلاری کلینتون این صفحه پر از ظلم و جور و جفاکاری را از تاریخ سیاست آمریکا ورق بزند و شخصاً بر این نامگذاری غیرقانونی نقطه پایان بگذارد. همه می‌دانید که در یک سال گذشته طرح انحلال و انهدام سازمان مجاهدین در میان بود. ضرب العجلی برای یک سره کردن کار اشرفی‌ها و قرارداد 7 ماده‌ای آخوندها با دولت عراق برای تسلیم یا نابودی این جنبش. با این همه آنچه قرار بود یک جابجایی داوطلبانه باشد بر اثر توطئه‌های فاشیسم دینی، بر اثر نقض عهد مکرر دولت عراق و انفعال ملل متحد و ایالات متحده صورت یک جابجایی اجباری به خود گرفت. یک جابجایی که جز به جز آن تحمیلی است و یادداشت تفاهمش فاقد خواسته های اشرفی هاست. اگرچه مفاد همین یادداشت هم اجرا نشده و در عمل طرح به زندان فرستادن اشرفی هاست. ساکنان اشرف نیز در 4 ماه می اعلام کردند تا وقتی زیر پا گذاشتن ابتدایی ترین حقوقشان ادامه دارد دیگر به لیبرتی نخواهند رفت. اما بگذارید تصریح کنم که اگر فکر می‌کنید با این فشارها مجاهدین از حقوقشان و حقوق و آزادی مردمشان کوتاه می‌آیند سخت در اشتباهی.
All of my friends from America who I saw this morning when we arrived said to me what an amazing gathering you had yesterday. President Rajavi, that the enthusiasm with which you were greeted was second only to the enthusiasm with which I was just greeted here. But in the hopes that some people in the State Department might actually see the reality that this is a massive worldwide movement for liberty in Iran and not anything like the State Department's descriptions. And I think what you did yesterday was historic and extraordinary and needs to be driven home so that everybody who makes foreign policy decisions in the United States understands just how big this movement is getting, how widespread it is, and how bipartisan the American support for it is. So I commend you on a very successful day yesterday. The United States should intervene decisively over Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty. We bear a moral responsibility. We gave a commitment as the United States. People believed in us. People protected us. Our officers who were there have told the truth again and again. And I believe the United States Congress should overrule the State Department and should insist in our intervening, and we should make this a major issue with the Iraqi government. I commend you for your courage. I commend you for your freedom. I commend your leader for the great job she has done and her persistence and her courage. It is an honor to be here, and candidly, that welcome is something I will never forget. Thank you very much.
Madame la Présidente, chère Madame Rajavi, chers amis, si nombreux ici rassemblés, ce rassemblement en cet instant est la preuve que votre nation reste debout, qu'il existe des vrais leaders incarnés par le Conseil national de la résistance et donc par Madame Rajavi. Oui, résistance pour dénoncer un marché de dupes dans lequel 2000 résidents d'Ashraf sont partis à Liberty dans les conditions que l'on connaît. Oui, résistance pour affirmer qu'aucune promesse du gouvernement irakien n'a été tenue sous prétexte que Liberty devait être un camp de transit provisoire. Mais je pose une question. Est-ce trop demander au gouvernement irakien que les paraplégiques disposent d'infrastructures adaptées et de disposer de leurs fauteuils roulants? Comme secrétaire général adjoint des Nations Unies, j'affirme avec force que l'ONU et ses fonctionnaires doivent garder une neutralité irréprochable.
And over again, the Iraqi government has prohibited the residents of Ashraf as they move to liberty from having basic humanitarian things. Why? Does it violate some strategic or military objective of the government of Iraq? No. The Iraqi government is doing it to be cruel, to be mean, to set up an emotional atmosphere that will drive the good residents of Ashraf to do some things that they may not want to do. We have got to stand with Ashraf. The Ashrafis in Liberty and in Ashraf have to know that we are with them, have to know that they've got your support, but have to know that they've got our support. I am ashamed of my government. My government has failed to protect the residents of Ashraf.
The United States Department of State to think about what it's saying when they say the MEK should remain on the terrorist list. I would invite the Department of State to listen to the next speaker.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you. Others have already spoken, and they will speak about the treatment of the people in Camp Ashraf, the danger that they face in this move to what really so far is a prison or concentration camp, not a relocation camp, the dangers of more violence, the dangers of the Maliki regime trying to carry out the will of the Iranian mullahs. But I want to speak about just one topic today, just one. It's about time that the United States of America, the European Union, all the countries of the world stand together with one very, very powerful voice and one very powerful argument: regime change in Iran.
At the very time that 2,000 residents were moving from Camp Ashraf to the very difficult conditions in Camp Liberty near Baghdad, where they can be interviewed by U.S. representatives and their refugee status determined. At that very time, a court in Washington, D.C. handed down a decision that we think was highly favorable to MEK. In that decision, the court told the State Department of the United States that it must make a decision by October 1, as to whether it will remove MEK from the list of foreign terrorist organizations, a list it never should have been on in the first place. And even in the setting of U.S.-Iran relations, this is the right moment. Some have speculated in the past that one reason the United States was delaying taking MEK off the list was fear that it would damage the possibility of reaching an accommodation with Iran over its nuclear program. Well, as you've heard and as you all know, even that ridiculous charade of talks with Iran has now collapsed.
We have a situation where 2,000 of these freedom fighters, these unarmed civilian refugees, are now trapped in half a square kilometre in Camp so-called Liberty. And the Iraqi regime is trying to encourage us trying to impose their will upon us to move the remaining 1,000 from Ashraf to Camp Liberty, where they are living in intolerable conditions with inadequate humanitarian concerns being dealt with. Well, I can tell you now that the designation by the United Nations of Camp Liberty as a temporary transit location is completely bogus. People have been there for 4 months. It's a refugee camp. It must be redesignated, and their rights must be completely adhered to.
Of course, we want to show them our support and our love and our solidarity. But we also want action to be taken. Action by the Department of State to delist the NCRI. Action by the Iraqi government to treat the residents of Liberty according to the principles of humanity and respect of human rights. Action by the European Union to accept resettlement in Europe of the residents. Action by the United Nations to accelerate the procedure of granting the status of asylum seekers for the residents. We want action, no more excuses, no more delays, no more lies, no more appeasement. Action, action, we want action.
I can tell you that as a commander that lost men and women in Iraq, the Iranian regime's role in training and equipping the Shia militia played a significant role in extending the sectarian violence that engulfed the Baghdad area in 2006 and 2007 and is directly responsible for the killing of hundreds of Americans and thousands of Iraqis. If I could, I'll close with just a few words about my dealings with the MEK. I got to Iraq in July 2004, just as the time that the MEK were receiving their protected status. I will tell you, we closely monitored the activities there at Camp Ashraf because we felt very strongly that we needed to honor the agreement that had been made by my predecessor to protect the MEK there at Camp Ashraf. We set up a system where we did weekly reviews. And my three generals who led those reviews for me are probably familiar to some of you, General Miller, General Brandenburg, and General Gardner. They briefed me weekly on goings-on at Camp Ashraf. Never in any of those briefings was I informed of any adverse activity by the MEK. In fact, close cooperation was all that we ever received. And so from that perspective, And so for that perspective, I watched with grave concern the events of 2009 and 2011, those tragic events. And they only reinforced to me what I believe is the best opportunity for everyone: the rapid and safe removal of the MEK from Iraq. And I can tell you that I firmly believe that the best way to facilitate this is the removal of the MEK from the list of terrorist organizations. Thank you all very much.
Today, I say on behalf of my colleagues, and I say with pride, that we will continue to support you and promise that we will be standing beside you when the final victory comes. 3,400 of its members are in Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty, and they have been suppressed at the behest of the Iranian mullahs through their proxy al-Maliki, and that must not be allowed to continue.
And we're going to fight till the end for the Ashrafi people. And the first thing that we're going to tell the world and those tyrants is that we're not going to accept for them to be obliged to go to Camp Liberty without any guarantee. It's not going to happen. We are not going to allow this, even though they're telling us that this is a condition for the delisting. Well, no, we don't accept that blackmail.
We ask this. We are prepared for every last person to leave Ashraf. We do not stall. We do not wait. We want people in Camp Liberty because from there, the fight goes on when we relocate people to Europe. We kept our promise in moving people to Camp Liberty. You keep your promise in keeping people safe and secure with basic humanitarian needs. This is the least the United Nations can do. Keep your word. We kept ours.
We must, instead of appeasement and accommodation, protect the lives of those at Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty who remain in constant danger. We need to delist the MEK, not only because it is the legally appropriate thing to do, it is also smart policy. The mullahs have branded the resistance movements here today as public enemy number one, and the reason is clear. The people here today ultimately will play a vital role in achieving freedom and democracy in Iran, and freedom and democracy are the greatest fears and the greatest threat to the mullahs.
Even more importantly, the regime in Tehran hears you as well, which is why they fear you as they do. Now, one of the curious aspects of the State Department's position on the MEK is when it looks at a country in transition, it looks at an opposition and says, is the opposition organized? I think we know the answer to that question. Is the opposition united? We know the answer to that question. Does the opposition believe in democracy? We know the answer to that question. Is the democracy inclusive? We know the answer to that question. So as you cry for freedom, they even hear you in Foggy Bottom. We know what needs to be done when we leave here. We need to go out and get it done. Now this is a day about imagining a very different future. Hopefully a day where our friends at Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty are out of harm's way.
The brave refusal of the people at Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty to be intimidated heartens all of us at this convention and all those watching around the world. Their determination gives us determination. Their courage gives us courage. Their example inspires us. and it inspires all people who yearn to live in freedom and in dignity. We are here today to try to right a wrong. We are here to help the men, women, and children in these camps live within the truth. Delisting the PMOI is the fastest, most certain way to reach that goal.
But my country must send a very clear message to Tehran. First and foremost, again, and it has to happen within 4 months, a decision. The MEK needs to be delisted. Secondly, America's leadership in the world and the UN should demand that the MEK members in Camp Ashraf and Liberty must be supported every single way. So, now I'm going to give you my last question. My last question is, do we need democracy in Iran now? Are you ready to provide that leadership?
I have served in the executive branch of our government. I have had access to information about terrorist organizations, and like many colleagues of mine, some of whom you will hear from today, who have seen the so-called evidence about the MEK, there is no justification, and there never was, for it to be put on that list. It was put on in the late 1990s under the belief that it would placate the mullahs in Tehran. That was wrong. It was kept on the list in 2008 under the impression it would placate the mullahs in Tehran. That was wrong too. The facts need to lead where they lead. Let the facts fall where they may. If there were evidence of terrorist activity, let the State Department present it to the courts. They haven't done that yet. So the first step is to delist the MEK and then provide opposition to it and other legitimate Iranian opposition groups.
I am one of the few people that can say I not only lived at Camp Ashraf for over a year, I also lived at Camp Liberty for over a year. But when I was there, we had running water, we had recreation facilities, we had shade, we also had freedom of movement. Unfortunately, that's not the case now. A short time ago, I sat in a courtroom and had to restrain myself as I heard my soldiers and myself denigrated by an attorney who said we didn't do our job at Camp Ashraf. And I listened as he said, the soldiers there never fully inspected. They never found any of the weapons that were there, and they were denied access to certain areas. Well, let me tell you, it was my responsibility to conduct those searches. And I used this very map to ensure that every square meter of Camp Ashraf was inspected.
I speak today as ambassador for the European Union for humanitarian causes. But I have also been a refugee myself, so I can imagine all too easily the agony and grief of those we are here to support today, imprisoned, excluded, and isolated of camps Ashraf and Liberty.
Thank you all very much. Well, the Alhambra offers a cautionary lesson about what the Iranian intelligence service, the MOIS, has been doing to the MEK and to any Iranian who opposes the government in Tehran. The MOIS spreads disinformation, makes it hard to identify the truth, and paints the victims of the regime's crimes as the guilty parties. This is how disinformation is done. Never be so crude as to attack in straight lines or frontally. Float conflicting versions of the facts. An obscure expert, for example, will assert something such as the inhabitants of Camp Ashraf are fomenting trouble for local authorities. And then other press organs can allude to this expert. And then the broader media are obliged to include these reports in their balanced presentations of the issue. For who is to say what's true?
I'm here today to express three things. The first thing I want to express is solidarity with the people of Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty. As an American, it pains me that my government has not stood up for the humanitarian needs of the people who are in those two camps and has not fought more to protect their basic human rights. The people of Camp Ashraf and the people of Camp Liberty deserve freedom. They deserve freedom of movement. They deserve to live without the constant threat for